welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, November 22nd. And today we're going to speak with Johnny Flynn, Assistant Professor of Religious Studies and Director of the American Indian Program at the University of Indiana, Indianapolis Campus, about an educational contract they recently signed with the Pokagon Potwatomi and a few other subjects coming into this Thanksgiving Day. Johnny Flynn, today we're going to talk about a couple of things that are going on. There's some really important information coming out of Indiana having to do with an agreement with the Pokagon band of Potwatomi, right? And then we want to talk a little bit about sparing the lives of a turkey after you're done with that, okay?
Got it.
Tell us a little bit about what might have been actually another a historic agreement going down, modern sense time anyway. Tell us a little bit about what happened with the Pokagon people here in the last week or so.
Well, last Thursday, the university where I teach, Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, signed a historic agreement with the Pokagon Potwatomi out of Michigan. Even though the Pokagons have their headquarters in Dowagiac, Michigan, they are actually the only federally recognized tribe in Indiana. They have 6 counties in Indiana that are part of their reservation status. So they are the only federally recognized tribe here. I've been doing recruiting of Indian students to higher education for a long time, but what makes this unique is that we're not recruiting individual Indian students, we're recruiting tribes. And that's important because, as you know, education, especially higher education, was pretty much dictated to us as to what kind of courses we should take and so on. And I felt that based on the example that I saw at Miami University with the Miami Indian Nation out of Oklahoma, that we could do the same thing here. We'll recruit tribes to come in and set their own agenda, their own programs with regards to education.
So you're asking them to come in and not only, and to fill some kind of a role that's not only monetary in nature. I'm imagining that that's part of it, but you're also asking them to give guidance on what kind of educational curriculum material they'd like to see taught or provided, or in reverse, to have their students that are going to come there learn?
Well, yeah, both of those, but you know, Harvard and Yale and Dartmouth and Princeton and many of the Ivy League schools were started in no small part to also educate Indians.
Indeed.
If you look at the treaties themselves made, at least half of them, made provisions for education. What we ended up with is boarding schools, mission boarding schools. We ended up with Indians traveling, in some cases, thousands of miles to go to higher education at East Coast colleges and get lost in the mainstream. But what we want instead is to give tribes an educated citizenry, and that's what we are going to try to do, is to develop distance learning, museum studies, education, educating a workforce that will staff their planned K through 12 school. You know, when we do development, as a result of our economic development, 90% of all the money that goes that comes in as a result of our economic development goes to non-Indians. And what we need in order to stem that bleeding is an educated workforce, be it in casinos or schools or whatever enterprise Indian nations want to be engaged with. We end up with non-Indian staff, and when we open a casino, Indians come in and they get jobs and they clean ashtrays and they deal blackjack and so on.
And they also become all the vendors, so entrepreneurship may be important as well in the formula.
Absolutely, and the university is where we have the resources to be able to educate the populace with what they want and not what the university or the boarding school or the educational institutions feel that we need. And so that's what makes this agreement historic. We're knocking at the door once again. The Pokagons are providing some resources to develop American Indian programs, and so we're going to sit down and we're going to figure out exactly what the Pokagon, Potawatomi, and other tribes might need to reach that goal of having an educated workforce.
Sounds good. Now, you had a signing last week. Where did that take place? What did it look like?
It was in Indianapolis, Indiana, and you can probably go on Facebook and find it. You can certainly come to iupui.com and see on our splash page the signing between the chancellor and the tribal chairman of the Pokagon Potwatomi, Matt Weesaw. And it was a good day. We got an opportunity to take tribal officials around the campus. And let me share with you a story. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from high school, right, or graduate from college. And when I graduated from college, I invited my mother, who was a boarding school dropout, Chilocco Indian School, ran away from there 4 times, was always embarrassed about her lack of education. And when she came to watch me graduate from college, I was busy, and in the course of the day, I happened to look over at my mom, and I saw that she was terrified. My mother was not afraid of much, but what she was afraid of was college. And here I was in the middle of this, not even paying any attention to how my mother felt about being, she might as well have been on the moon. And I realized then that what we were lacking in Indian country was a culture of education, where our people were comfortable sending their children off, in some cases hundreds or even thousands of miles away, to another planet, really. Right. And I realized that my mom's educational experience should not be duplicated. And so that's why I really have set on a lifelong journey to bring Indians into the educational process, but also to take university officials and make them more sensitive to who we are as people. We're not just another minority, and that's how the university tends to look at it. There's an array, African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, and we are part of that array, and so they tend to deal with us
like a minority, a special sector, yeah.
And we're not. We are sovereign people. We have sovereign status. And that's what we tried to emphasize in the event last Thursday, was the sovereign status of the Pokagon Potawatomi as an Indian nation, part of American history for 10,000 years. And I hope we made that impression on our school.
You had that agreement transcribed in what language and by who?
Potawatomi, we have a guy by the name of Mike Zimmerman, a Pokagon Potawatomi who learned the language in about 3 or 4 years, and I saw him give a history of the Pokagon Potawatomi in Anishinaabe-Moin. And I was very impressed with him, and I said, in order to emphasize the fact that we are not just another minority, but we are a distinct political, social, and economic entity, worthy of engagement at the highest levels, we need to emphasize the fact that we have our own traditions, our own culture, and our own language. So I had Mike translate the Chancellor's remarks into Potawatomi, and it was quite impressive to see that.
That'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to look at that sometime in the future, you know, to be able to see that marker. It's true that is it true that your kindergarten teacher always thought that you were going to be the first college graduate in your family when she certified you to go to first grade when you were 8 years old?
I was actually 5.
Oh, oh yeah, that's right.
I was precocious.
Johnny Flynn, if you had a chance to spare the life of a turkey, what do you choose on Thanksgiving here? Tell me a little bit about your perspective. We got about 2.5 minutes to go here to do this, but tell me what you're going to do on Thanksgiving.
Well, in 2.5 minutes, I could tell you that number one is I'll have a steak, likely a buffalo steak, and I may share some meal with a friend of mine, Shawnee. But the thing that I am most concerned about is that Thanksgiving celebrates the Pilgrims who, as you may know, robbed graves November 16th, 1620. They got off the Mayflower and went to Corn Hill, a place now called Corn Hill, and dug up 2 Indian graves. And they stole the jewelry off of these corpses. As far as we know, those people had died in a smallpox epidemic that swept through the area some months or maybe even a year before. And of course they were looking for gold. When Tisquantum or Squanto shows up in the spring, a lot of people don't know, the first thing he told them is, you want to know why Indians didn't feed you through the winter? It's because you need to return those grave goods that you took. And so the first encounter between the Pilgrims and Native Americans didn't go off well until the Pilgrims repatriated the funerary items that they had stolen from the graves. So the people that we celebrate, or children celebrate, were grave robbers. And the reason why they didn't survive or died in mass that winter is because of that grave robbing. And I often think, 1 million burials out there being held by educational institutions and museums, they need to give those back. They need to give that stuff back in commemoration of Thanksgiving. And until then, I'm not going to kill any turkeys in order to celebrate.
But if you ask some young child, 8 or 9 years old in the U.S. education system, they might even tell you that it was the Pilgrims that brought the deer meat and the squash and the turkeys over on the Mayflower with them and fed the poor Indians.
Well, here's one that everybody went to Grandma's for Sunday chicken dinner, right? It's an old tradition. The reason why is because when Europeans came here, they ate meat once a week. That's how poor they were. They came among Indian people, and we were eating meat 2 and 3 times a day. And the thing about meat, you never run into an Indian vegetarian. If you do, it's because they're a crappy hunter. So what that did, think about this for a moment, the average size of the male and female European immigrant in those days was around 5'6", 5'7" for the male and 5 foot, 5'1", for the female. And now the average size of an American is 5'10", 5'11" for a male. And it has to do with the diet that they embraced from Indians when they came to the Americas. So we're responsible for the size and strength and stamina of the American male and female.
We're going to have to leave it at that today, Johnny Flynn. It's been good talking with you. Okay.
It's good to talk to you as always.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian country. On this edition of the Native News Update, stop by again soon. Miigwech.